The first shot rang out just as the sky turned crimson, and Temperance James knew her husband wasn't coming home. Through the window of their small homestead on the outskirts of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma Territory, 1887, she watched as a lone figure on horseback approached, not with the familiar gait of William's chestnut mare, but the solemn trudge of a messenger bearing bad news. Temperance gripped her swollen belly, 7 months with child and already feeling the telltale twinges that shouldn't have come so soon. The rider dismounted, hat in hand, Sheriff Mills from town, and she knew before he spoke that the stagecoach robbery had claimed William's life. "I'm mighty sorry, Mrs. James," the sheriff said, his weathered face a mask of genuine regret. "There was nothing anyone could have done. Those Dalton boys, they didn't leave survivors." Temperance nodded mechanically, one hand still protectively curved around her unborn child, the other clutching the doorframe to stay upright. "Thank you for coming yourself," she managed, her voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside her. The sheriff hesitated. "Madam, with winter coming and you being in your condition, perhaps you should consider I'll manage," she interrupted, her chin lifting slightly. "This is our home. William's dream, I'm not leaving," the sheriff nodded reluctantly. "I'll send word to the Women's Auxiliary. They'll look in on you." But Temperance knew help would be sparse. Broken Arrow was a small settlement and the nearest doctor was in Tulsa, nearly 20 miles away. As the sheriff's horse disappeared into the distance, the first real pain gripped her lower back and Temperance pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a cry. Too early. Much too early. On the same day, Ethan Mackenzie was riding hard toward Broken Arrow, his cattle drive completed earlier than expected. At 32, he'd been working the ranges of Oklahoma Territory for nearly a decade, having come west after the war between the states left his family's Tennessee farm in ruins. He wasn't the typical brash cowboy quieter, more thoughtful, with a steady hand and a reputation for fairness that earned him respect even among the rowdier cowboys. The setting sun stretched his shadow long across the prairie as he urged his horse faster. Something told him to hurry, a feeling he couldn't explain but had learned never to ignore. Those instincts had saved his life more than once on the frontier. As he crested the final hill, overlooking the scattered buildings of Broken Arrow, his gaze was drawn to a small homestead on the outskirts, a tendril of smoke rising from the chimney. But something about it seemed wrong. The corral was empty, no livestock in sight, and even from this distance, he could see the garden had started to go untended. Ethan frowned, remembering the young couple who had settled there the previous spring. He'd helped the husband William, was it? Raise the barn frame during a community gathering. The wife had been pretty with auburn hair and gentle eyes, heavy with child when he'd last passed through 3 months ago. On impulse, he turned his horse toward the homestead. Night was falling fast and the temperature was dropping. At the very least, he could check if everything was all right before heading into town. As he approached, he heard a cry of pain that raised the hair on the back of his neck. Without hesitation, Ethan leaped from his horse and bounded up the porch steps, knocking firmly on the door. "Hello." "Anyone needing help in there?" the cry came again, followed by a weak voice. "Please, the door's unbarred." Ethan pushed inside to find Temperance James on the floor beside the table, her face ashen, her skirts darkened with fluid, her eyes, glassy with pain and fear, fixed on him. "The baby's coming," she gasped. "It's too soon." Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd helped birth calves and foals, but never a human child. "Where's your husband, madam?" "Dead," she managed between labored breaths. "Stagecoach robbery 3 days ago." Ethan knelt beside her, gently helping her to sit up. "Mrs. James, I'm Ethan Mackenzie. We met at your barn raising last spring. I need to get you to a doctor." She shook her head frantically. "No time. The pains are too close and the snow's starting." Ethan glanced toward the window, where fat white flakes had indeed begun to fall in the gathering darkness. The first winter storm, arriving weeks earlier than anyone had predicted. "Then I'll stay and help," he said with more confidence than he felt. "Can you walk to the bed?" With his support, Temperance managed to get to her feet, but another contraction hit before they'd crossed half the room. Her knees buckled, and Ethan caught her, lifting her in his arms as gently as he could and carrying her to the small bedroom at the back of the cabin. "I'll need hot water, clean linens," she whispered between pains. "And prayers, Mr. Mackenzie. Lots of prayers." Over the next hour, Ethan moved with focused efficiency, stoking the fire, heating water, finding the bundle of baby linens Temperance directed him to. All the while, the storm intensified, wind howling around the eaves of the small cabin, snow accumulating rapidly outside. Temperance's labor progressed with frightening speed. Too fast, she told him between increasingly violent contractions, her knowledge as a midwife's daughter surfacing through her own agony. "The baby's coming breech," she gasped around midnight after examining herself. "Feet first, it's dangerous." Ethan, who had been maintaining a respectful distance, providing water and support without intruding on her modesty, realized the situation had become life-threatening. "Tell me what to do," he said, rolling up his sleeves. Through her pain, Temperance gave instructions in short, breathless sentences. Ethan followed them precisely, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he helped turn the baby, supporting Temperance's body as she pushed with waning strength. When the tiny infant finally emerged into his waiting hands, Ethan felt a surge of triumph that quickly faded. The baby boy, impossibly small, with translucent skin and a bluish tinge, wasn't crying. "Rub his back," Temperance whispered hoarsely. "Gently but firmly." Ethan did as instructed, his calloused fingers carefully stimulating the miniature spine while he cleared the infant's mouth and nose with the corner of a clean cloth. After an eternity contained in seconds, a weak, mewling cry escaped the tiny lungs. "Thank God," Ethan murmured, wrapping the infant in the warmest blanket he could find and placing him on Temperance's chest. "He's breathing." But Temperance's relief was short-lived. "He's too small," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as she examined her son's tiny form. 7 months isn't enough time. He needs to be kept warm, fed every hour if he'll take it." She looked up at Ethan, her eyes filled with a desperate plea. "If he survives the night, there might be hope." Ethan nodded gravely, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Then we'll make sure he survives." For the rest of that night, as the blizzard raged outside, Ethan and Temperance fought a different battle within the cabin walls. The tiny boy, whom Temperance named William, after his father, struggled for every breath, his little chest rising and falling with concerning irregularity. When Temperance grew too exhausted to stay awake, Ethan carefully took the infant, cradling him against his own chest for warmth, keeping him wrapped in blankets heated near the fire. He fed him drops of sugar water from a clean cloth when he wouldn't take his mother's milk, speaking in soft, constant reassurances. And when even that didn't seem enough, Ethan began to pray. He hadn't prayed properly since before the war, his faith having withered during those bloody years. But now, holding this fragile new life in his hands, the words came back to him, first hesitant, then flowing with increasing conviction. "Lord, this child deserves a chance," he whispered, rocking slowly beside the fire. "His mama's already lost her husband. Don't take her son too. Please give him strength. Give us all strength to see him through till morning." Temperance woke briefly near dawn to find Ethan still keeping vigil, the baby nestled against his chest, his lips moving in silent prayer. Something shifted in her heart at the sight this rough cowboy treating her son with such tenderness, fighting for the child's life as fiercely as any father would. "Is he?" She began fearfully. "Still with us," Ethan confirmed, carefully transferring the infant back to her arms. "He took a bit more sugar water an hour ago. His breathing seems stronger." Temperance examined her son with a mother's critical eye, and cautious hope bloomed. The baby's color did indeed seem better, his tiny fingers flexing with more vigor. "You've been praying," she observed softly. Ethan nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "Hope you don't mind, Mr. Mackenzie. Your prayers may have saved my son's life." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." The blizzard continued for 3 days, effectively cutting off the small homestead from any outside help. During that time, Ethan became indispensable, chopping wood to keep the fires blazing hot, melting snow for water when their well bucket froze, hunting a rabbit that ventured too close to the cabin to make broth for Temperance. And every night he sat beside baby William's makeshift cradle, praying and sometimes singing low, soothing songs from his childhood. By the fourth morning, when the storm finally broke, little William was taking his mother's milk regularly, his grip surprisingly strong for such tiny fingers. Temperance herself was recovering her strength, though the dark shadows beneath her eyes spoke of her continued worry. "I need to get to town," Ethan said as he served her a breakfast of cornmeal mush. "Let folks know you're here, that you need help. See if I can fetch the doctor from Tulsa." Temperance's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with unexpected strength. "Will you come back?" Something in her voice, vulnerability mingled with trust, made Ethan's chest tighten. "Of course I will," he promised. "Just need to make sure there's more help coming than just me." He set out on foot, his horse being better kept in the barn during such weather, and trudged the 3 miles into Broken Arrow through knee-deep snow. The town was just digging itself out, and his arrival at the general store caused a stir of surprise and relief. "Mackenzie. Thought you might have been caught in the open during that blow," the storekeeper, Jenkins, exclaimed. "Nearly was," Ethan replied. "Found shelter at the James place. The widow needs help. She delivered her baby during the storm 2 months early." His words set off a flurry of activity. Within an hour, the women of Broken Arrow were organizing supplies and assistance, and a messenger was dispatched to Tulsa for the doctor. Sheriff Mills approached Ethan as he gathered provisions to take back to the homestead. "Mighty decent of you, Mackenzie, helping the widow like that." Ethan shrugged uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same. "Maybe, maybe not." The sheriff studied him carefully. "You planning to stick around for a while?" Ethan replied. "At least until Mrs. James and the baby are on firm footing." The sheriff nodded. "Good. Woman shouldn't be alone out there. Too many desperate men roaming these days." By noon, Ethan was making his way back to the homestead, pulling a borrowed sled loaded with supplies. He found Temperance by the window, little William sleeping peacefully in her arms. "The doctor's coming from Tulsa," he reported, "and the ladies from town will be out tomorrow, soon as they can clear the north road." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you. I can never repay what you've done for us." "Nothing to repay," Ethan insisted, busying himself with unloading the supplies. "Just glad I was passing by when I was." That evening, as they sat by the fire, the baby asleep in his cradle, Temperance asked Ethan about himself, where he'd come from, his life as a cowboy, his plans for the future. He found himself telling her things he rarely shared, about his family's farm in Tennessee, destroyed in the war, his wandering years afterward, his dreams of someday having land of his own. "Why haven't you settled yet?" she asked. "You're not like most cowboys, too thoughtful, too steady." Ethan smiled ruefully. "Never found a reason compelling enough, I suppose. The open country gets in your blood." Temperance nodded, understanding in her eyes. "William was like that when I met him, restless, but he said I gave him a reason to put down roots." Her voice caught. "I don't know how I'm going to manage now without him. One day at a time," Ethan said gently. "And you won't be alone. This community looks after its own." The doctor arrived the following day, examining both Temperance and tiny William with thorough care. His prognosis was cautiously optimistic. "The boy's a fighter," he declared. "Keep him warm, feed him often, and with luck he'll thrive. But I won't lie to you, Mrs. James, the next few weeks will be critical." Before leaving, the doctor pulled Ethan aside. "That woman and child would have died without you," he said bluntly. "Premature births rarely end well, even in ideal circumstances. What you did was remarkable." Ethan dismissed the praise, uncomfortable with being called a hero for what seemed like simple human decency. But as the days passed, and he continued to help around the homestead, he found himself increasingly drawn into Temperance's life and the daily miracle of little William's growth. The women from town came regularly to help, but it was Ethan who repaired the leaky roof, mended the broken corral fence, and ensured the woodpile remained stocked. It was Ethan who sat up on nights when William was fussy, allowing Temperance much-needed rest. And it was Ethan who gradually began to see the homestead not as someone else's dream, but as a place where he himself might belong. One evening in late January, nearly a month after William's birth, Temperance found Ethan on the porch, staring at the star-filled sky despite the biting cold. "You should come inside," she said, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "It's freezing out here." "Just thinking," he replied, his breath forming clouds in the night air. "About what?" "That I should probably be moving on soon." The words felt wrong even as he spoke them. "Spring roundup will start in a few months. The rocking bee will be expecting me back." Temperance was quiet for so long that Ethan finally looked at her, finding her face pale in the moonlight, her expression carefully controlled. "Of course," she said finally. "You have your own life, your own work. We've imposed on you far too long already." "It's not an imposition," Ethan said quickly. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know that I'm not the same man who rode up to your door that night, and I'm not sure I can go back to the life I had before." Temperance took a step closer, her eyes searching his face. "What changed?" "Everything," he said simply. "You, William, this place." He gestured at the homestead, now in much better repair than when he'd arrived. "For the first time since the war, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Then why leave?" she whispered, Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. "Because I'm starting to want things I have no right to want, Temperance." The sound of her given name on his lips, never spoken until now, made her breath catch. "Like what?" she pressed. "Like a family, a home, you." The last word was barely audible, but it hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Temperance took another step toward him. "William would have wanted me to be happy," she said carefully, "to find someone good and kind to help raise his son." "It's too soon," Ethan protested weakly, even as hope surged within him. "Is it?" Temperance reached out, her cold fingers finding his. "You've prayed over my son, you've mended my home, you've been here every day, showing me through actions what kind of man you are. And I've watched you, Ethan Mackenzie, I've seen your heart." Ethan looked down at their joined hands. "I'm just a cowboy, Temperance, I don't have much to offer." "You offered prayers when we needed them most," she said softly. "You offered strength when mine was gone." "What more could I ask for in a partner?" His gaze met hers, searching for any doubt, any hesitation. He found none. "I think I've been falling in love with you since that first night," he confessed. "Watching you fight for your son, seeing your courage, but it felt wrong with your grief so fresh." "Grief doesn't mean my heart stopped beating," Temperance replied. "And William and I both need you if you're willing to stay." Instead of answering with words, Ethan gently pulled her closer, giving her every opportunity to step away. When she didn't, he lowered his head and kissed her, a gentle, questioning kiss that deepened when she responded with unexpected fervor. When they finally parted, breathless in the cold night air, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I'll stay," he promised, "for as long as you'll have me." In the weeks that followed, Ethan's place in Temperance's life and heart became increasingly defined. He moved his few belongings from the bunkhouse in town to the small room off the kitchen, maintaining propriety while remaining close enough to help with William during the night. The baby continued to thrive against all odds, his tiny body filling out, his lungs growing stronger. By March, he was barely distinguishable from any full-term infant, his bright eyes tracking movement, his tiny hands reaching for faces. Word spread throughout the territory about the premature baby who survived a blizzard and the cowboy who had prayed him through the night. People came from neighboring settlements to see for themselves, often leaving with gifts or offers of help. The story touched something in the community's heart, a reminder that even in the harsh realities of frontier life, miracles could happen. On a mild day in early April, Ethan took Temperance to the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the homestead. William James' grave was marked with a simple wooden cross, but Ethan had arranged for a proper headstone to be delivered from Tulsa. "I wanted to speak to him in a manner of speaking," Ethan explained as they stood before the grave. "To make a promise." Temperance squeezed his hand encouragingly. "I never knew you," Ethan said to the grave, his voice strong and clear in the spring air, "but I know you were a good man who loved your wife and waited for your child. I want you to know I'll do right by them both. I'll raise your son to know your name and your courage. I'll love your wife with all the respect and devotion she deserves. This land you chose, this dream you started, I'll make it flourish." Temperance wiped tears from her cheeks. "He would have liked you," she said. "You're both good men with kind hearts." That evening, as the sunset painted the prairie in gold and crimson, Ethan formally asked Temperance to be his wife. There on the porch, where they had first acknowledged their feelings, he knelt and offered her not just a ring, a simple gold band he'd purchased in Tulsa, but a promise. "I can't replace what you've lost," he said, "but I swear to you, Temperance James, that I will spend every day making sure you and William have the life you deserve. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, Ethan Mackenzie. I will marry you." They were wed 2 weeks later in the small church in Broken Arrow, baby William cooing contentedly in the arms of one of the town women. The entire community turned out to witness the union, their presence a testament to how the story of the premature baby and the praying cowboy had touched so many hearts. Sheriff Mills, who performed the ceremony in the absence of a regular minister, concluded with words that brought tears to many eyes. "What God has joined through trial and miracle, let no man put asunder." The years that followed brought both challenges and joys to the Mackenzie family. The homestead flourished under Ethan's careful management, expanding from the original claim to include adjacent lands as they became available. Crops grew, cattle grazed, and the small cabin was gradually transformed into a proper home with rooms added as their family grew. William Mackenzie for Ethan formally adopted him that first year grew into a strong, thoughtful boy with his birth father's chin and his mother's gentle eyes. When he was 4, Temperance gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Sarah, who arrived at full term after an uneventful pregnancy. 3 years later, a second son joined the family, Joseph, named after Ethan's father. Through it all, the story of William's birth and Ethan's night-long vigil became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. It served as a reminder of how their family had begun not through blood or planning, but through a chance encounter during a storm and a cowboy's willingness to pray through the darkest hours. On William's 10th birthday, as the family celebrated with neighbors and friends, Temperance found Ethan standing apart, watching their children play with a look of wonder on his face. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her arm through his. "That night," he replied. "How close we came to losing him, how different our lives would be if I hadn't decided to check on that smoke from your chimney." Temperance leaned her head against his shoulder. "I used to think it was just chance, you arriving when you did. Now I know better." "What do you think it was?" "Providence," she said simply. "God sent exactly who we needed, precisely when we needed him." Ethan smiled, pulling her closer. "I think he knew what I needed too." "And what was that?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "A reason to stop wandering," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "A place to belong, a love worth staying for." As the Oklahoma Territory transformed into the 46th state and the frontier gradually gave way to civilization, the Mackenzie homestead remained a testament to what could be built from desperation and faith. The premature baby became a strong young man, the young widow found love again, and the cowboy who had never expected to settle down discovered that home wasn't a place, but the people who filled his heart. And each year, on the anniversary of that snowbound night, Ethan and Temperance would stand together on their porch, looking out at the land and family they had built, remembering how it all began with a baby born too early and prayers that lasted till dawn.